Hey there. Today let's talk about the census, why it's so important and why it's under attack. From our very beginnings, it's been a core American belief that all men are created equal. For even longer, we've struggled with the definition of all, and for that matter, equal. But if you're going to talk about all and equal, you're going to need to count people, and that's where the census comes in. What is a census and where did the idea come from? Well, it came from Rome, back before time was a thing. Caesar needed to make sure that everyone was rendering unto him what was his, taxes. Talking about taxes. If you had a good count of everyone, you would know exactly how much to expect in taxes and could hold people's feet to the fire. So much we could talk about from the Roman census, from big data to IT security, but ain't nobody got time for that. So let's keep it moving. How did the US Census get started? Well, taxes. It was about paying taxes. Calm down, calm down. It was also about representation. You might recall the Founding Fathers felt pretty strongly about taxation and representation. They felt so strongly, in fact, that it took 11 years to reach a compromise on how to represent all of us. It's called the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise, reached at the 1787 Constitutional Convention, gave us a bicameral legislature. That means our lawmakers are split into two houses. The Senate, where each state gets 2 senators, regardless of size, and the House, where each state gets a number of representatives that's proportional to their population size. This, and taxes, is what necessitated having a census to count the number of people living in the United States. That's the Cliff Notes version, and there's a lot more to it, and you should definitely learn more about the Great Compromise if you're interested. By this time, the Founding Fathers had already finished arguing about how to tax the states, either by counting the wealth and assets of the people or by counting the people themselves, and they decided to count the people, not property. But then the matter of slaves came up. Both the North and the South wanted to count slaves. The North wanted to count them for taxation but not representation, and the South wanted to count them for representation but not taxation. Enter the 3/5 Compromise. This constitutional compromise was all about who to count and how to count them. It's among the first mentions of BIPOC by the Founding Fathers, and by mention, I mean it completely discounts Native Americans and says that other people, that meant enslaved Africans, get counted at a ratio of 3/5 for both taxation and representation of their states. So note, this didn't mean that enslaved Africans could vote or have any other rights of citizenship. It simply meant that they were counted up, and 3/5 or 60% of that number was added to the free population. Again, this is a Cliff Notes version, and there's so much more to learn about the 3/5 Compromise, which had a major impact on US politics for decades to come. It allowed slave states to have a disproportionate influence on the presidency, the Supreme Court, and other positions of power. It also resulted in the country having a roughly equal number of free and slave states, with the last slave state admitted to the Union in 1863. Altogether, the 3/5 Compromise had a detrimental impact on vulnerable populations, such as the enslaved and the nation's indigenous peoples. Slavery may have been kept in check rather than allowed to spread, and fewer Native Americans may have had their way of life tragically upended by removal policies. The 3/5 Compromise allowed the states to unite, but at the price of harmful government policies that continued to reverberate for generations. The 3/5 Compromise was effectively ended in 1865, when the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery, and it was formally repealed by the 14th Amendment in 1868, which still left Native Americans out and ultimately did even more damage by giving the southern states more representative power based on the full count of the Black community, while they enacted grandfather clauses, Jim Crow laws, and other racist policy to continue to deny the benefits of citizenship to African Americans. This would continue for nearly 100 years until the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The 3/5 Compromise and its repercussions definitely deserves its own video. I just wanted to highlight here the importance and the historic weight of being counted and represented in American society. Whether and how to count American communities of color has always been a contentious issue, and today is no different. Despite Census Bureau efforts to extend the counting period until April 2021 because of a late start and slow progress caused by the coronavirus pandemic, the Trump administration is actively working to end counting at the end of this month, September. This will have the effect of minimizing the count of those traditionally hardest to reach: immigrants, low-income communities, and communities of color. Why is the census still important today? For one, the Constitution says so. The US Constitution mandates that a census be taken every 10 years to count all people, both citizens and non-citizens, living in the United States. An accurate count of the population is required by law and serves as the basis for fair political representation. 2, state population counts from the census are used to reapportion seats in the US House of Representatives across the 50 states. If the population isn't accurately represented, the balance of power in Congress will be skewed for the next decade. 3, state and local officials use census results to help redraw congressional, state, and local district boundaries to meet the one person, one vote rule. This is where a discussion of gerrymandering would come in. But again, no time for the details, so do your own research. And I'll just say that once the balance of power is skewed, districts will be redrawn to preserve partisan political power or minimize a particular demographic. 4, governments rely on census data to determine the need for new roads, hospitals, schools, and other public sector investments. 5, census data are also vital to businesses and nonprofit organizations as a key source of information about the changing needs of the US population. 6, last but not least, census data will be used to distribute more than $800 billion in federal funds to states and local communities for healthcare, education, housing, and infrastructure. Suffice it to say that the US Census plays a vital role in many areas of American life. When you respond to the census, you help make sure that your family and community get their fair share of funding, services, and political representation. What about undocumented immigrants? I get it. Immigrants have legitimate concerns given the Trump administration's record. In particular, immigrants who are undocumented, have a deportation order, or are non-citizen may be especially afraid of being targeted. If you fall under any of those categories, remember that there's no citizenship question on the 2020 census. Also, there are strong confidentiality protections that make it very difficult for the government to target non-citizens. The law requires everyone, including all immigrants, regardless of status, to respond to the census completely and to answer all questions truthfully. But more importantly, census participation ensures that all residents, regardless of citizenship status, are able to access the full rights and privileges they deserve. Allowing the 2020 US Census to undercount the most vulnerable populations will perpetuate the imbalances of power and funding that have been at the very definition of underrepresented communities. So what can you do to help? Educate yourself. The more you know about the problem, the more prepared you'll be to counter systemic racism and xenophobia and oppose racist and divisive policy. Participate in the ongoing US Census. Being counted is one of the best ways to ensure you're represented and that your community gets its fair share of resources. Fill out your census form, tell your family and friends about the importance of the US Census, and help ensure that they've filled out their census forms. Register and vote. This is important, not just for the presidential election, but crucially for the down ballot state, county, and local posts that more closely affect the policy in your cities and towns. Get involved in your community. Voting is just the beginning. You have to hold your government officials accountable more than once every 4 years. You have to engage to ensure your community reflects you and your values. Until next time, be safe out there. It's a beautiful and dangerous world.